Greetings, everybody. Appreciate this is an shalom, absolutely unbelievable occasion. I just have to say that I'm just blown away by this. This is just really just brings tears to my eyes. It's so beautiful when you have cities that are just small cities. We call ourselves the small but the mighty. I'm from Savannah. We actually are having our own mikvah dedication in 2 weeks as well. But I don't think the timing was on purpose like that. But just when you think about it, the dedication, everything that took place, the hours, the funding to make such a thing happen, is really unbelievable. So kol hakavod to the Charleston community, to all the donors, to everybody who spent all the time. Unbelievable. Whenever you think about Savannah and Charleston, we're kind of like sister cities with each other. Anytime I mention in Savannah that I was in Charleston, and I've had thankfully many opportunities to be in Charleston over the past few years, everybody's like, oh wow, going back, this person married this person, or say hello to this person, or I grew up with that person. There's such a connection between the cities. So I just want to first just give a little introduction more about my background, where I'm from, what I'm up to. I'll elaborate a little bit because it ties in a little bit to the message of the mikvah. And then I want to talk a little bit about the specifics of a mikvah, the deeper understanding, and then maybe some takeaways, what we can learn from this, how this can inspire our lives in a practical way. So I moved to Savannah 15 years ago. I was actually born in New York. I grew up in Chicago. I studied in New York, and then I studied and lived in Israel for 8 years. And then I moved to Savannah 15 years ago. So I kind of like saying that I have like the best of all these different worlds. Every single place has a different flavor to it. Anybody who has been to New York, Chicago, Israel, every place, I know we have a lot of Israelis here. A lot of people talking to me in Israel, in Hebrew. My son actually studies in Israel and Jerusalem right now. So I love all the different backgrounds. The only time it gets really confusing is when you're driving. So if you ever drove in New York, kind of like you have your hand on the horn, like anybody stops for half a second, beep, beep, beep. And you move to Savannah, and I'm at the light, and person turns green, and the person in front of me is just not moving. I'm like, honk the horn, honk the horn. Don't do it, because in Savannah, it's like the biggest insult if you honk your horn at somebody. I don't know, I'm imagining Charleston is a little bit like Savannah. And like my brain is split at this point. Do I honk or just wait patiently? And most times I'm successful in overcoming myself and not honking, but it's challenging. But those are the real things. Other than driving, it's amazing having all the different backgrounds. So I moved to Savannah 15 years ago to be the youth director, youth rabbi of BBJ Synagogue. Anybody here been to Savannah? Yeah, okay, yes. Amazing place, as is Charleston. I started running NCSY in Savannah. At the same time, I was completing a master's in clinical mental health counseling. And I did an internship in SCAD, which is Savannah College of Art and Design. Anybody heard of that? Mm-hmm. Worked in their counseling department there. And then in 2017, I opened a private practice. I work a lot with anxiety, depression. I really specialize in trauma, abuse, and relationships. I do a lot of couples counseling. I use the Gottman method for couples counseling. If you haven't heard about it, might be worth looking into. And then I do a lot of EMDR and IFS, internal family system. You can look into them. They're great models to be aware of. I also moved on to start a group practice because I realized that one person, there's always a need for more. And so I started Green Oasis Counseling, and thankfully now we have 4 clinicians, we have a supervisor, we actually have our office manager who lives in Israel. I'm so grateful for that we get to support Israel at the same time. And we're in the midst of hiring now our fifth clinician. Alongside that, I have the zchus, the merit of really running NCSY. And I started with Savannah, but then I realized that there's so much more to do. And so the first few years, I would run middle school, Shabbatons, and we would have Myrtle Beach come to us, we would have Charleston come to us, we would have Jacksonville come to us. And it was great, beautiful. We could have 60 to 80 middle schoolers on a Shabbaton. But something was always bothering me. Where are the teenagers? If you have middle schoolers, there's got to be teenagers. So I was just saying to myself where are the teenagers? How do we get them involved? And that was a problem, a challenge that I said, I have to figure out how to do it. And over the past few years, what I started doing was reaching out to anybody I could think of in any of the cities, in Charleston, in Charlotte, other cities, and saying, how can we get the teenagers involved? And that became my mission, my dream. How do we build up? And thankfully, we've had exponential explosion really over the past few years, where now we have 10 chapters just amongst the Greater South, where we have clubs for teenagers anytime basically a teenager wants a club in their school to support them, we're there for them. And we're having a Shabbaton in Raleigh in 2 weeks from now. It's the first time we've ever run a Shabbaton there, and really just unbelievable. So the inspiration of what can be accomplished, and there's so much more to do, is something that I want to make note of. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about a mikvah. What is a mikvah? So as Rabbi Mimran said, and by the way, it's an extreme pleasure working with Rabbi Mimran. We've been working together since Rabbi Mimran moved over here. Really, it's unbelievable. And I appreciate the opportunity to work together with the Mimrans and the Charleston community. So as Rabbi Mimran said, a mikvah is an expensive swimming pool, I think you said, right? Yeah. And I actually tried looking it up. Like, how do you define a mikvah? So a Jewish ritual bath I've heard of. It's not an easy one to figure out. I work with my counselors that work with me in Green Oasis Counseling. My goal is that I want them to be Jewish aware, even if they're not Jewish. So I always tell them any Jewish questions that they have, they should pose to me, and I'll explain to them, because they have Jewish clients. And so far they haven't posed this question to me yet, what's a mikvah? But I'm like nervous, how am I going to explain it to them? There's some easy mitzvos, like, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your friend like yourself. That's an easy one to explain. I think the whole world can relate to that. Maybe don't murder is like a good mitzvah that I think we could explain. Maybe don't steal. Even Shabbat I could explain to somebody. But how do you explain mikvah? So what is mikvah exactly? Throw it out there. Ask people, what do you think about mikvah? They'll be like, oh, what? So the basic idea of a mikvah is the fact that when a woman goes through her monthly cycle, there are times that the couple is supposed to refrain from physical intimacy. And then after the cycle moves forward, then you take a little gap, and then the woman would immerse herself in this Jewish ritual bath, and that's what purifies her, and then the couple can engage in physical intimacy. That's the basic structure of the mikvah. Honestly, that's a tough one to explain to somebody. Okay, so let's get this straight. So when the woman's going through her time of her month, then you separate, no physical intimacy. What does that do? That probably messes up all the marriages. Like, how do you have as it is, people can barely survive marriage nowadays. And you're telling me that you have all this separation? Come on. What is it? Like stacking up all the odds against us? How are we supposed to survive life like that? So there's a general principle. What I'm going to pull from over here is some Talmudic principles and some Kabbalistic principles. And there's one principle that often the most beautiful concepts are the most hidden. And that's a concept in life. The most beautiful, treasured concepts are often the most hidden. And something that's hard to understand, and at first glance it seems like it's the antithesis of what we would want, because Judaism loves family life and marriages, and we want to encourage it. There must be more than what meets the eye in the story. So the question is, what really is going on? What is the depth? What is the mystery? What is the Kabbalistic concepts? What is hidden in the depths of the waters of the mikvah? I'll have time afterwards. What I'm going to do is I want to try to leave a little time afterwards for questions. So for starters, just a story, an extremely powerful story I saw recently from Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. He talks about how he heard from a friend of his was visiting Russia, and the friend told him that he started developing a connection with somebody in Russia named Yaakov. And we've had over the years many times that Jewish people would visit Russia, and they developed a connection with each other. And eventually, this Yaakov trusted this visitor from America, and Yaakov said to him one time, he said, "Come on, I want to show you a secret." And he pulled him he said, "Come here." And he took him to a closet, and he said, "Let's move this aside." And he moved aside some clothing in the closet, and there was a floorboard. And he picked up the floorboard, and he saw there were stairs going down. And he said, "These stairs go down to a mikvah." And he said, "This is top secret. Don't tell anybody about it. But there's 40 families in Russia right now that use this mikvah, and if we would get caught, that'll be the end of everything." He said, "You want to know how I built this mikvah? I didn't tell a single person. I would take the dirt out and slowly take it out of there. And then a little bit more dirt out. And nobody can know that I was building anything. Because it's the most severe crime to be building a Jewish item place in your house without permission. And of course they wouldn't get permission for it. And slowly but surely, we dug out more dirt. But that's not enough. It's not enough to dig out dirt. You need cement. You need a lot more that goes into mikvah, especially the rules. Anybody who's involved in the planning, I'm sure you know there are many rules to getting it right. He said we did it painstakingly, one shovel after another, a little bit of dirt, and then we had to bring the cement in, and we had to get the pipes, and miraculously, they did this under the Russian, without the Russians knowing about it. And eventually Yaakov moved to Israel, and this person said to Yaakov, you put your life at stake for this. Why would you do such a thing? I mean, who's ready to really put their life at stake for this? And he said, I did it because I knew it was the only way that I could live as a true Jewish person. And this is a dedication that we have. If you look throughout the years, throughout history, there are so many stories of Jews that would literally put their lives at stake because this is so important to them, the concept of having a mikvah. And sometimes a place couldn't have a mikvah, and then a woman would go into the ice-cold water to immerse herself. So many stories throughout the generations. The question is, what is it about the mikvah that is so powerful and so special that throughout the generations, Jews have risked their lives in order to dedicate themselves? And whether it's the sacrifice of money or the sacrifice of time or literally the sacrifice of their lives, what is it that is so special about the mikvah? So what I want to do now is I want to bring down a few Jewish sources, what they say about the mikvah, and maybe from there we'll start getting a little picture to the depths of the waters of the mikvah and what we can learn from it. So for starters, this is just a story the Medrash brings down in general. How should we relate to mitzvahs, to the commandments, when God tells us to do things? So there's a story brought down of this little furry animal that God created, and he put him inside the forest. And this little furry animal is walking in the forest and is just created. And all of a sudden the lions and the tigers and the bears, they all try jumping on this little furry animal. And the animal starts trying to crawl away from them and walk away from them, and it can barely run. So this animal goes back to God and says, God, what did you do to me? You make me, you create me, you put me in this forest. I can't defend myself, I can't run, I can't do anything. How am I supposed to survive life? And God says, oh, I have a solution for you. And he takes out these two little things, and he straps it on the animal's back. And he says, now go back in there, now you'll be fine. And this little furry animal goes back, and now he's got these things on its back. And he's going in the forest, and all of a sudden the lions and the tigers are starting to attack it, and it starts running and can barely walk right now because it's got these two heavy things on its back. He's like, goes back to God. He says, God, what just happened? I complained to you because I can barely survive. And now you make it even heavier for me. What am I supposed to do? And God says, you're missing the boat, my dear little bird. These are wings. With these you shall fly. And you can fly away from all these animals. And this, the Talmudic Saracens say, the rabbis say, is how this is the secret to mitzvos, to commandments in general. We're a little nation, the small Jewish nation. We've been persecuted throughout the years. And God says, you know what? I'm going to make you this little nation amongst all the other nations. But have no fear. If you're worried about them, I'll give you 613 commandments. That will make you survive. Yeah, just don't drive on Shabbat, don't do this, don't do that, make sure you go to synagogue. That's how you'll survive. And the Jewish nation goes back to God and says, God, whoa, time out over here. As it was, life was so hard, I could barely survive, and now you give me all those commandments? How are we supposed to survive? God says, you're missing the boat. The purpose of commandments is not to weigh you down. Commandments are the wings that help us fly. That is how we are meant to survive life. And that is a deep concept. It's a concept that's not easy to grasp. But if we really delve into it, we'll see every mitzvah, every commandment, it's not really meant to be a commandment. I don't even like the word commandment. Really, the word mitzvah has to do with an opportunity of connection. Savas means connection. And mitzvah is really an opportunity to connect with godliness and connect with eternity. And that's our perception in general of all mitzvahs. If we understand it, great. And if we don't understand it, that means we need to delve more into it. But for starters, we know that the mikvah and everything I just described is not here to weigh us down, but is here to help us fly through life. So the question is, what is it? How do we fly through life with the mikvah? So a few concepts to be aware of regarding the mikvah. Number one, the word mikvah relates to another word, which is tikva. And if anybody's ever heard of any congregations that maybe relate to the word tikva, anybody heard of the word tikva before? Dor tikva, what does dor tikva mean? Generation of hope. The word mikvah has to do with hope. Mikvah, tikva. Anybody here ever heard the word hatikva? Israeli national anthem? It's all related to each other. So for starters, on the one hand, the word mikvah means a gathering, like a gathering of water, but it also stands for hope. So that's the starting point over here. This is not what confines us. This is what gives us hope. Another concept, Kabbalistic concept, is if you think about the world, there are solids and liquids in the world. And each one has a different purpose. A solid represents permanence. A liquid represents fluidity and change. Which one do we need to navigate life? Permanence or fluidity and change?
Fluidity.
We need them both. The only way to survive life is a combination of both. In a mikvah, on the one hand, you have a structure. You have the permanence. You have all the rules to the mikvah, all the permanence. But the essence of the mikvah is fluidity. What's the main part of a mikvah? The water. Fluidity. Water represents the ability to change, to bend to your surroundings when you need to, the ability to change. That is a critical point in Judaism because we believe in the power of hope and the power of change. Has anybody here ever messed up in life? Everybody messes up in life, right? The verse says, Sheva yipol tzaddik v'kam. Even the most righteous person, 7 times, he will fall down. So if everybody falls in life, then what is it that differentiates between the successful and the not successful? It's not whether we fall. Rather, what is it? It's whether we get up. And we get up and we learn from our challenges and we get up stronger and stronger. And guess what? If you take the letters of mikvah, the mem, the kuf, the vav, and the hey, and you switch them around, you know what you'll get? Koma. Koma, not coma like coma, but koma like in Hebrew, for those who speak Hebrew, means to rise up. Lakum means to get up, which means that mikvah represents the ability to rise up. You know who stole that from us, by the way? Who stole the slogan, rise up? If I'd been in Atlanta, I would know the answer to that question. Who? The Falcons. Huh? You've never been at a Falcon camp. Could be I'm in the wrong city here. But the slogan "Rise Up" is a Jewish slogan that came from the mikvah. So if you're ever at a game and you hear people saying "Rise Up," you'll say, "Oh, you must be studying the laws of mikvah." So what is it? The idea is the fluidity, the water, the ability to change, the hope. We don't get stuck in life. That's an important concept of mikvah. The idea is we all have challenges. We all fall at sometimes. But we don't believe in the concept that you're eternally doomed to that. We believe in the ability to rise up and persevere and get stronger on account of our challenges. There's another interesting source that talks about a mikvah, which is from Parshat Bereshit. And it talks about Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. And there's an absolutely interesting verse over there that Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan points out. When it talks all about Garden of Eden, and we know there's a tree of knowledge, and Adam was created, and Eve was created, and you have this interesting verse that just got thrown in there in the middle, which a lot of people have no idea, they don't pay attention, it sounds interesting. It says, "And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it split, and became 4 headwaters." What does that have to do with anything? You know, you talk about the whole story of Adam and Eve. Whoever talks about the river? You ever hear about the river in there and the 4 headwaters? You hear about that in the story. You hear about the tree of knowledge. Interesting discussion about what the tree of knowledge is. What does this water have to do with it? And the Talmud says that this water was the source to all water that we have. Which means when we connect with water, we're actually tapping in to the Garden of Eden, which was the holiest place, the place originally where Adam was meant to live for eternity. And the waters of the mikvah, they say, when you immerse in the waters of the mikvah, you're tapping into that status of Adam before the original sin, before the sin, which is absolute purity, the ability to completely purify ourselves. So that water is the water of Gan Eden, the water of the Garden of Eden. In addition, they say that the water of the mikvah represents being inside the fluids, being inside the mother's womb. When a child is inside the mother's womb, it's completely pristine and pure, no sin. When we immerse in that mikvah, we're going back to the state of being completely pure. We all mess up, but we have the ability to rectify things and start over again, refresh ourselves, and start with that same purity of that little cute baby that comes out, right? That cute little baby that comes out, that the baby's born, everybody loves to hold the baby, it's a cute thing, right? That's what we can get to that state of, that complete purity again. In addition, the Kabbalistic sources say water retributes chesed, kindness. Water is Hashem's kindness to us, the ability to rise up again, to move past what we've been through. Now, how does this do to the relationship, though? So we have one concept over here, that water and the mikvah represents hope. The mikvah, the tikvah, ha-tikvah, the water represents hope. On the other hand, water also represents relationships. And this is fascinating. Because again, as I mentioned, if you think about it at first glance, you would imagine that these laws of mikvah should be the worst thing to a relationship. How am I supposed to navigate life? 2 weeks? I have to refrain from physical intimacy? What's that going to do to the marriage? And guess what? The Talmud says literally the exact opposite. Rabbi Meir says in the Talmud that it's easy to get accustomed to somebody. Would anybody say, you don't have to raise your hand if you want, but is it possible anybody's ever had that maybe we don't fully appreciate our wives, or maybe they don't fully appreciate us? Not my wife, of course. But it happens. Rameir says, you get accustomed to something, you might forget to have the same level of gratitude. Like first when you get married, thank you so much for this, and this is so exciting. And then as life goes on, sometimes we get accustomed to each other, and maybe we don't have the same appreciation. And Rameir says, that is the beauty of the mikvah. It gives a pause and a refresher. Now, it doesn't pause the whole marriage. For sure, you still have emotional intimacy. Of course, you should be connected to each other. What it does is it takes out the physical component for a little bit. And says, you know what? Maybe we have to focus on other aspects of the marriage, of the relationship. Sometimes people get so caught up in the physical that we forget to focus on other aspects. What about the emotional part? What about the connection? What about just going on dates again? And this is something that I see all the time in therapy. I work with people. I love the hardest cases, by the way. It's interesting. It's my Talmudic training where I just love analyzing what the challenges a couple is going through, what an individual is going through. Talmud is always about analyzing, getting to the source of things. So that's what I try to do. A couple comes to me and they're stuck. It happens all the time. And they're like, we've been trying this for 30 years already, and nothing's changed, and we can't communicate, or we can't do this. And I say to them, okay, let's talk about the skills you've been using for 30 years. Because if you try digging with a knife, you won't get that far. But if you start digging with a shovel, you might get somewhere, right? I said, let's talk about the skills. What does your communication look like? And it's always the same patterns over and over. They criticize, they have contempt. Maybe at some point we can talk more about it. There's certain patterns that couples generally develop, which leads to unhealthy patterns. And what I do is I say to them, okay, let me give you maybe some other tools. Maybe we can kind of do a little pause on those tools and let's refresh. And let's see what we can do. And they'll be like, we've been trying this for 30 years, it's never going to work. And I'm like, really? You haven't tried it this way yet, have you? They're like, no. And it's unbelievable the change it can make. Or an individual. It's so easy to get stuck in life. People get depressed. They get anxious. They feel like they don't have meaning in life. And sometimes it takes a pivot and say to ourselves, 1 second, what is it I'm trying to accomplish in life? Would you believe me if I told you that there are people that have lived almost their whole lives, but never really given thought to why they're living life or what gives them true meaning in life? What happens is sometimes people, they live their whole life just, I have to get a job, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. And then one day they wake up and they retire. And they just feel depressed. I'm like, whoa, you're like the most successful person. Why are you feeling depressed? They're like, I don't know, I don't know why I'm waking up every morning. I said, well, why'd you wake up the past 30 years? They're like, because I needed to make money. And but I don't need to make money anymore. So I say, well, that's a good question. And what gives us meaning in life? What gives us purpose in life? Those are all important questions to ask ourselves. And sometimes we need that little break in the relationship, that not a break of the relationship, but just a little pause, refresh button, and see where are we going in life. And that's what Rameir is saying. Rameir says, after, when the woman comes back from the mikvah to this relationship, it's like she's coming back from the bridal canopy, which means like you just got married again. And every month, says Rameir, you can have a new marriage. Can you imagine like a new marriage, like that freshness, excitement? That's what mikvah can bring. So at first glance, a mikvah takes away from the relationship, but that is completely wrong. It only takes away from it if you're just focused on the physical. But if you're focused on the deeper meanings in life and the real relationship and the emotional connection and the excitement, the mikvah is what helps keep the relationship alive. Similar to the concept of the moon, which we know the moon has its renewal every month. And that's the Jewish people. We wax and we wane. We have our ups and our downs. But the moon is always there. And the relationship is always there, as long as we keep pushing at it. So we have here a few different concepts of mikvah. We have on one hand the concept of tikvah, the hope from the mikvah. On the other hand, we have the concept of actually it's meant to enhance our relationship. And there's actually 3 different types of relationships, says the Vilna Gaon, that we have. We have relationships with our partners, other people. We call it ben adam la adam, between man and man. And then we have relationships between man and God. And the third level of relationship, does anybody know? Ben adam la'atzma, excellent. Between ourselves and ourselves. And you tell it to some people and they'll be like, what are you talking about? And that's what I try to do in counseling all the time, is I try to help people actually visit that relationship within themselves. And some people are terrified of that. They spend their whole life running away from looking at themselves. And that's part of what we try to do. Maybe it's not so scary after all. There's some people, what happens is they went through a scary situation when they were a child, and they've been running away from it their whole life. And they'll do anything not to look at themselves. They'll go on drugs, they'll get addicted to something, because why? I need a distraction, I need to run. Why are you running? I don't know, I just need to run. You know why I need to run? Because they're afraid to look at themselves. But Judaism would say, whoa. No, let's look at ourselves. Let's get to meet ourselves. Shalom Aleichem. My name is Eli Lob. My name is Eli Lob too. Nice to meet you. Tell me about yourself. And that might sound scary for some people. But the goal is, we try to figure out, we try to work through that. And that's what I try to help people with that. But that's also what mikvah represents. These 3 levels of relationships, it helps us enhance and increase each of those 3 aspects of relationships. On the one hand, it helps us with the relationship with our spouse. So it gives that freshness, that renewal, the hope every month. It also gives us the relationship between us and God. Because what it does is it brings God and holiness and purity into the marriage and into the family life. We say, God, welcome to our relationship. Welcome to our family. And that's the best thing that we can do. Because following this mitzvah, the commandment, again, it's not just a commandment, but it's the ability to connect with God and connect with eternity and connect with holiness and give meaning to life. Godliness, holiness. How do we relate to that? Mikvah and the other mitzvos. That's what it's about. It's not about chaining us down. It's about freeing us up to accomplish much more. I'm not just a human being that eats and sleeps and does basic things. I'm a human being that is focused on eternity and meaning in life and inspiration in life. Those are some of the concepts. So again, what I would say is, what I'm taking from it now, I'll tell you there's numerous concepts of mikvah. Numerous. But these are our starting point. The hope and relationships. Those are the 2 real parts that I want to take from it. The ability to change, to hope, to inspire, to grow, and the ability how mikvah can help us focus and refocus on all the 3 aspects of our relationships. I just want to tell you some personal stories, what this means to me, and maybe what we can take from this. But if you could start thinking already, what does hope relate to me? Every single person, we should all have the ability to dream and to hope. As I mentioned, I had my dream to grow out NCSY and to grow out for all the teens. And that's something that I'm working on. You know, in NCSY, the joke is, but real is, we say, anybody know what NCSY stands for? Yes, thank you. That's what it'll say on paper. But we say, anybody know what we say it stands for? Nothing can stop you. That's what we say it is. I don't know if that's what they had in mind or not, but that's what it means to us. And that's the message that we give to teens, and that's the message that we give to ourselves. Nothing can stop you. And I truly believe that. If we make it our dedication and our dreams, the question is not, can we achieve our dreams? The question is, how do we achieve our dreams? And what will it take? I am only here today because of hope. For a few different reasons, but one of them is the fact that my grandparents are Holocaust survivors. And my grandfather was in Auschwitz. And he lost 4 siblings, parents, grandparents, nieces, nephews. He survived the Holocaust with 1 brother. The way I spell my last name is Lob, L-O-B. Have you ever met anybody else who spells their name like that, L-O-B? No. Everybody else spells it L-O-E-B. We came out L-O-B, it was an umlaut in Europe. I don't have that many relatives. And there are people that deny the Holocaust, and I say that really. So we're all the Lobs in the world. Because my grandfather came out with 1 brother, and that brother ended up moving to Israel, and they changed his name from Lob to Lev. So one of the children turned it back to Lob, but I have very little relatives named Lob. And the reason is because of the Holocaust. There's no other reason than that. I would have had all these cousins. I would have had a huge family. And my grandfather, he said this over. He barely spoke about the Holocaust. We have 2 times recorded, and that's it. He wouldn't talk to us about it. But he spoke to my father's class one time in Chicago, and one time he agreed to be interviewed. Otherwise, he couldn't talk to the family about it. It was too painful for him. And he said after the Holocaust, he was a broken person. And he had to reevaluate his relationship with God. God had just taken away his entire family, basically. And he said that for a few months after the Holocaust, he could not pray. He didn't know, what do you do? What do you do if somebody's taken away your whole family? He said he couldn't connect to God at all. And he had to make a fateful decision. This was a decision that every Holocaust survivor had to make. What do I do with my life at this point? And it's not just a Holocaust survivor. We all have to make this. We all go through challenges in life. And we all have 2 directions we can go. Where do we go from this point? And he made a decision. And he said, I'd rather have a Father in heaven that I don't understand, and maybe even that I'm angry at, than not have a father at all. He said, I lost everything, and I'm about to throw away. The last thing left was my connection to God. He said, I'm not prepared to give that up, even though I don't understand why he did this to me. And he was saying an expression, in der Himmel is a Vater. Does anybody know Yiddish? In the heaven is a father. And this became his mantra in life. He said, I don't understand, but I'm going to keep this connection going because it's all I have left. And he went on from there, and he married my grandmother. And then my father was born, and my aunt was born. And that's the only reason why I'm here right now. Because he could have, when he had to make that decision right after the Holocaust, he could have easily said, that's it, I'm done with life. I can't get married, I can't make a family, how could this be? I'm just going to go and do drugs all day or whatever. But he said, no, we are rebuilding. We're moving on. And that's why family's here. Hope is ingrained in the DNA of the Jewish people. We've been through a lot together. We've been through the Holocaust. We've been through tons of persecution. But we are not a nation that gives up. Just look at Israel. 1948, 3 years after the Holocaust, and Israel's already rebuilding. A flourishing country. What are the chances of that? A flourishing country right after the Holocaust when 1/3 of the Jewish humanity was killed out? The answer is we are a nation that is constantly rebuilding. Last year was a tough year for a lot of us. But it started by me, Erev Sukkot, the day before Sukkot, last year, going back 1.5 years, where I went to visit my grandmother in her assisted living center. And I found out that I showed up 2 minutes after she had just passed away. Nobody knew about it. I walked in to visit. I live in Savannah. I went to Chicago. And the aides were crying when I walked in. I said, what happened? And they couldn't even talk. And we did her burial in New York in the middle of Sukkot. And then October 7th happened, which again was another shakeup and another wake-up for all of us. And nobody knew what to do. And then after that, my beloved rabbi, his name is Reb Shimon Ulster, who for the past 25 years, anytime I had a tough question, I would pose my question to him. And he always gave me guidance what to do. He passed away then. And then, right after that, my daughter, my 10-year-old Batsheva, Thankfully, she's doing okay now. She ended up in critical condition with a sudden emergency heart failure, out of the blue. And maybe sometime I could spend an hour just talking about that. I'm not going to do that now. Maybe sometime I could talk more about it. We use this story just to help inspire others. But basically, one day, as far as we knew, she was totally healthy. The next thing, her heart was barely pumping. And she was airlifted in critical condition from Savannah to Atlanta. This happened a year and a half ago. They did everything they could just to try to keep her stable. They tried medicines, it didn't work. They put her on an ECMO. Anybody know what ECMO is? She was in ECMO for 9 days, just trying to see if they can get her some form of her heart pumping again. It was not to be. They put a machine inside of her called an LVAD. Usually only cardiologists know what an LVAD is, a left ventricle assist device. We say the VAD stands for very awesome daughter. But they did a surgery, open heart surgery on her. At that point, she couldn't stop bleeding. They just spent the whole day trying to keep some blood inside of her. They did another surgery. Eventually, she ended up having a heart transplant. And thankfully now, she's doing amazing. Baruch Hashem, Batsheva, if you end up watching this, shout out to you. She's 11 now. But again, I could spend a whole hour on that. But throughout that ordeal, those are tough questions that a family has to ask themselves. It was 3 months of having a daughter in and out of critical condition. And what I tried to focus on was the messages of the mikvah. The messages of tikvah, of mikvah, of hope. There's always hope. And instead of focusing on how scary it was, we would focus on there's hope. And there were thousands of Jewish people rallying behind her. People would come up to me and say, you know, I never did the mitzvah of challah before, but I did on behalf of your daughter. And somebody else came and said to us, I bought a Tehillim, a Psalms, because it wasn't appropriate to say Tehillim, Psalms from a phone. So I bought my first one ever. And there were thousands of people doing any mitzvah rallying behind her. And that represented, to me, all these concepts of mikvah, the concept of hope. There's always hope. We learned that from the great Rabbi Akiva, if you've heard of him. If not, please do some research on Rabbi Akiva. He lived through the destruction of the temple, and he was always focused on rebuilding. And to me, that was the 3 relationships as well. The concept of the relationship with God. God's here for us. Even maybe if we don't understand it, we have a loving Father in heaven. And the concept of being Adam la-Adam. We're all here for each other. And thankfully, I don't know how I was able to view what we were going through as part of what the Jewish people collectively are going through. I really felt that we're all in this together. And the concept of being Adam la'atzmo, between ourselves and ourselves. How do we view this? I spent a lot of time researching how is a Jewish person supposed to feel and act when they have a child in critical condition. And I couldn't find a prayer out there when your daughter somebody's daughter goes to heart transplant. What prayer do you say? Or emergency procedures. I wrote my own prayer because I didn't know what prayer to say. And what do you do when you walk them to the surgery room and then you leave them and you know it's going to be 12 hours before you see them again, and who knows what's going to happen in the 12 hours? And I would come up with my own prayers to do. I would say the Shema with her. It's the most powerful moment. When you walk your 10-year-old daughter to the surgery room and they say to you, this is where you stop and this is where we take over. And at that moment, the moment of hopelessness, helplessness, where there's nothing we could do except for turning to God. And I turn to God and say, God, she's in your hands now, because there's not a single thing that we can do. We brought her to this room. We brought her to the hospital. The doctors are in charge of her. They're your agents, God, not mine. There's nothing I can do. They're your agents. And that the beauty, if you think about it, there's a beauty in the powerlessness where you get to say, God, she's your child, you gave her to us, and now you take care of her. So again, thankfully she's doing good right now, Baruch Hashem, but amazing lessons that we can learn from there. So just to summarize, and I'll leave a little room for questions. So the idea of the mikvah is, on the one hand, it looks like it's very complicated, like it seems to be the antithesis of what we'd stand for, but what I'd say is it's the exact opposite. It has as many commandments. If we get to the depth of it, there is tremendous beauty hidden in all these commandments, and all these mitzvahs, and all these ability to connect. Again, let's focus on the hope. Come up with dreams. Don't get stuck. Every single person, if you're here right now, you know more about Judaism than the majority of Jews. You know that? And do something with it, please. Let's come up with a passion. Let's come up with a mission. Every single person, we're a small nation. We need to be there for each other. We can all build. We need to all have dreams and figure out how to make these dreams happen. How can we build the Jewish nation? Because we lost a third of our people in the Holocaust, but we're not giving up. We're having hope, and we're rebuilding. And we're going to focus on our relationships with God, with our partners, couples, family, our friends. I'm going to focus on introspection of ourselves, and we're not going to give up, and nothing can stop us. We're going to move forward and rebuilding. And that, my friends, I think is a deeper message of to Mikvah.